Welcome to BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT. And today's debate is about offshoring in 2012 and beyond. BCS has had a lot to say in the past about this. We've produced books, recently we've produced reports, and we've also had thought leadership debates. However, this is an ever-changing area, and of course, it will change again in the future. So to discuss where we should be now and whether BCS should be any more involved, we have with us Elizabeth Sparrow, a past president and expert on offshoring. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you. We
have John Milner, who's a freelance consultant, previously at Cambridge University. Welcome, John. We have Karim Hyatt. He's an interim COO involved in software products. Welcome, Karim. And we also have Gary Nuttall, who is currently working in the business intelligence in the insurance sector. So perhaps you could start off the conversation, just looking at this issue of whether there will be a hollowing out of the industry over the next few years. Now, as we lose quite a number of roles to offshoring. What do you think about that issue, Elizabeth?
Yes, I think there is an issue potentially with a loss of a certain cadre of job roles that have been very important to careers for professionals. I think there are two potential dangers that I can see causing that hollowing out. One is that companies offshore without a real understanding of the professional input, the input they need from IT experts to define, to manage, to produce strategies and so on. So there's a misguided belief, I think, for some companies that this means they need no IT expertise internally. But I think also there's a danger if we try to cling on to jobs as they exist today in the IT field. I think it would be a great mistake to think that IT has somehow stopped evolving and we should at all cost cling on to the jobs as they exist today. We need to be looking at the jobs for tomorrow. But there is that risk, I think, and we need to be aware of it and tackle it in the profession.
Karim, what's your feelings on that?
Well, I've worked with companies who have wanted to offshore. Indeed, I've helped some of them to do so. In every case, in at least when I've been involved, I've made sure that there was a core team onshore. So in the UK or in Germany or wherever. It is extremely important, and that's at all levels. So it's extremely important that you keep these, sometimes what we call low-level jobs, you know, where you get the junior programmer. Because when you're dealing with a remote team, it's really important that you know what is going on, that you understand the technical concepts that are being worked on abroad. If you don't do that, they will firstly take you for a ride. They will just say something will take 6 months when it actually takes a week, and you'll pay over the odds. So you need someone there who actually understands what's going on. Now, if companies don't nurture these teams here and actually invest in these teams, then they will lose out later on. And I think at the moment we still have, you know, the vast spectrum of IT personnel here. We can get hold of them, sometimes with difficulty. As it gets more technical, it gets more and more difficult. But we still can do it. And I think if companies don't invest and really look at it as an investment, they will eventually be paying over the odds.
If we need somebody here at every level anyway, if we offshore a particular function, does that not undermine the idea of offshoring in the first place, John?
No, I don't think it does, because in many of these cases, you've got to ask the very basic question, what's it for? So somebody sitting there is part of the organisation that's considering outsourcing and or offshoring a part of its activity, needs to be clear about the answer to that question, first of all. So in a sense, you're not offshoring control of your business in any sense, or even a part of your business. You're offshoring activity, and that's a fundamental difference. But I think there's a lot in what Karim says about these relationships, because many organisations offshoring don't really think about the cultural differences. For example, in some cultures, they just don't like to say no. So unless you can qualify the answer you're getting beyond yes, then you're taking a risk that you probably can't even see. So I think offshoring is a very complex and mostly, frankly, human activity in terms of developing relationships and understanding how those relationships need to work to be successful. So it can be very positive, but it's a highly risky business if you don't take some of those issues into account.
Okay, Gary, what's your feelings on that?
Well, I have slightly different perspectives. I think that the way IT works, IT is about enabling change. And change quite often means, in pure computing terms, automating things. So people are going to lose jobs. Ultimately, there aren't any paper tape operators in the UK anymore. There aren't any punch card operators anymore. So, roles are going to change anyway. And offshoring may be part of that, but it's not everything. Things are going to move on in any case. And so I think to say that it's purely due to offshoring is a falsehood. That's simply that you will move certain roles to other countries simply because of the economic argument that it's cheaper. But I think companies are discovering at last that actually, whilst something may seem cheaper at first, the fact that you have to put in the additional controls and processes, as Karim says, actually has a cost overhead in its own right. And so the cost argument for offshoring decays away. But I think that we are going to see a loss of certain types of jobs anyway, and we need to accept and move on and start looking at what are the new roles that we need to be ensuring that we fill people's capabilities with.
You mentioned, Karim, I think that certain roles are actually starting to become difficult to find now here in the UK. Can you expand on that a little bit?
I think, it's just a matter of how many people go through the process, how many people study computer science, how many people are doing even computer-related or IT-related jobs. There are fewer and fewer of them. It's no longer seen as quite as cool as it used to be in the 70s and 80s. To find the very specific jobs that you sometimes need, and my involvement has been within the software product as opposed to internal IT. You sometimes, especially within gaming, for instance, need extremely specialist and clever people. Real, techies, down to the core, and that is difficult to find. And you go to India, where you're getting possibly 500,000 IT-related graduates a year coming out of the vast amount of universities, and at least you got the people. Yes, you got to find them. It's difficult to find them. You need to go through the recruitment exercise at least as diligently as you do it here, if not more. But the fact is that the people are out there. And if you want to put up a large team, 100, 200 developers or IT staff in a room, you're more likely to be able to do it in a place like India than in a place like the UK.
Okay. There were some conversations before this debate took place, as you all know, on various social network sites, mentioning about the potential changes in the types of roles that will be required. And I think you all agreed there that that's just going to be developing. Here's a couple of the remarks that were made, that there is always going to be some development work, for example, that's going to be sensitive in nature. Some things always need to be done face-to-face. And also, if you employ agile methodologies, that it's often beneficial to be local to the thing you're working on. How do you feel about those? I see some shaking heads there, which is excellent. Gary, go on.
Well, I think one of the challenges with Agile is actually the culture fit, which was mentioned before as well. The whole concept. I've had experience of having an offshore team onshore trying to adopt Agile. And that was a real stretch because the training at college and everything was based around traditional methodologies, waterfall, you do this, then you do this, then you do this. Very rigorous, very procedural. When you start introducing Agile, which involves flexibility, adaptability, there were some real struggles there that we failed to overcome. Now, that might simply be because we didn't have the experience and that capability to be able to make sure we did it right. And one of the conversations we were having earlier is how, in order to do things right, you need to have learned lessons from other people already. And is there a framework you can put into place, which means you can do things in some way. But my experience from both offshore and onshore is that the match with Agile has not been good, but that might simply be my experience.
It's interesting, actually, that you say that, because I have exactly the opposite view. I think that Agile has made offshoring easier. The fact that previously, and I think outsourcing in general, so outsourcing, whether it's onshore or offshore, it becomes easier with Agile. And I think the problem that we've had with Agile is that it's relatively new. So I know a lot of companies in the UK that are still not adopted Agile. And so they struggle with the transition in the same way that everyone else does. But the fact that you don't need to spec out absolutely everything and you have this iterative approach enables you to offshore in an easier way. You don't have to write these massive documents of very detailed specifications. You can write your user story, ship it off, and work at it in an iterative way, and the results that you get are much better.
I think there's a good deal of merit in that. And I think a lot of this is about looking at the way both methodologies have broadened over the years. There's now very often more than one way you can do something. One way may be more optimum than another in a particular context, and you have to look at what approach you're going to take to a piece of development work. In the same sort of way, you can then take a much broader view of where the resources to do it are going to come from. Whereas it used to be the IT department, in a sense you can now say it's the world. So it doesn't alter the fact that you have to go through a very systematic planning, risk analysis, judgment process in setting up a program of work. But again, it's a question of choosing the right resource and the right skill and the right approach for the right job. And the fact that this is now something that can be done on a global perspective, I think is a huge benefit. I don't see it as a major problem at all. It may be in the sense that there's a bigger management challenge than there used to be. It might be argued that it's a lot easier just to sit in an IT department and all do it together as a team of 10, but the world isn't like that anymore, and that sort of team simply can't cope anymore.
If I could just pick up on that as well, actually, it's interesting that a number of my experiences have been on follow the sun type projects, where you actually have teams globally who pass on the work to each team, either providing support or development. And the thing when you turn that around is that all of a sudden the UK just becomes part of that chain. And so at the moment we're talking about the threat because we could outsource software development to Brazil or something. Well, it might actually be that we're doing it the other way around and we're actually part of doing the software development for China. If you do it as a follow the sun, certainly within global organisations where they have the capability around the world, I'm seeing more of that.
Interesting. Elizabeth.
And that actually comes back to an important point for me, because you were talking about techniques, the agile techniques, which is very important. But I think for me, another one of the questions is, where does the UK sit globally? Where are our real strengths? Where are we going to grow? And are we actually developing those professionals right from the time they're school kids through to when they're qualified that can actually benefit both the UK economy and have very satisfying careers? I think the fact, for example, that we leave the games industry without access to the sort of skills that we need means there is something lacking in our public policies as a nation, and perhaps in our approach as professionals to how we are developing others. I think we have some tremendous strengths coming now. I remember hearing recently how strong we are in the Internet of Things, which is a growing phenomenon, of course. I mean, those are the areas for me where I think we need to look at what are the IT skills and professionals needed there, and then to see whether we are developing those individuals rather than simply assuming that we will carry on much as we have done in the past. Because the one thing we do know in IT, things will not carry on as they have in the past.
I think that's very fair, and I think also that it's not so much an educational issue. If you look at the profile of higher education in the UK, there is a great deal of technical training goes on and education, and many of the recipients are actually coming from those countries to which we offshore. You know, something of the order of 60% of the students in some of the major universities actually come from overseas, not the UK. So education in this area of itself is almost a part of the UK's economic contribution, if you like. And the fact that we then buy some of the output back doesn't seem to me to be a huge issue.